For one British driver, last weekend's Silverstone Grand Prix was an incredible outpouring of relief. For another, it was a crushing defeat and a case of what could have been all over again. Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes F1 team did everything they could to win the British Grand Prix. Hamilton drove a faultless race and they got their strategy spot on. At McLaren, their drivers did everything they could to secure the race win, but their pit wall produced one of the biggest fumbles since the Ferrari clown wall gained its nickname at the same track 2 years ago. Understandably, their drivers are not happy. So today, I'll check out what happened with McLaren's strategy at the British Grand Prix and why they really should have won. So don't go anywhere. It was just a week ago that Lando Norris was having to give painful interviews in the media pen after missing a race win through no fault of his own. In Austria, it was a collision with Max Verstappen that saw him retire from the race with nothing to show for an excellent weekend's performance. He found himself in the exact same position in Silverstone, and as Brad Pitt gave a fake interview behind him in the media pen, celebrating a victory for the upcoming F1 film, Lando had to stand there and be reminded of what could have been. Any thought of a Drivers' Championship challenge must be a long way from his mind now. After the Miami Grand Prix, it almost looked possible, but beating Max Verstappen will require perfection, and McLaren and Lando haven't managed to achieve that. A deficit of 84 points is probably insurmountable. If Lando and Max hadn't collided in Austria and finished first and second respectively, and McLaren hadn't fumbled their strategy at Silverstone, that gap could be down to 54 points. A much more achievable target, with Mercedes now in the picture to take points off Verstappen. Of course, it's easy to think of what could have been. Had the race at Imola been a few laps longer, Lando likely would have won there as well. A better start for Lando in Spain could have got him a win there as well, but losing 4 seconds of race time behind George Russell in the opening laps cost him. The problem for Lando and McLaren is that what happened. If you aren't perfect in the moment, then it doesn't matter what could have been. It's a lesson the team is learning the hard way at the moment. As they improve and start to find their feet as a race win contender, and maybe even championship challengers this year, they're discovering all the things that Mercedes and Red Bull have internalized over the last 15 years. McLaren don't have the experience of making race-winning decisions. They don't have the bravery to make a bold decision when needed. They don't have the faith in their strategy and models when it counts most. And in Silverstone last weekend, that lack of experience cost them a 1-2 finish. Having started the race 3rd and 5th, the McLaren drivers were probably expecting a challenging race to overtake the Mercedes cars ahead of them, but as the first sprinklings of rain came down, they glided past both Mercedes cars as if they were in a different class. The performance advantage that McLaren had on a track surface with just the gentlest kiss of moisture was shocking. Russell and Hamilton looked like they turned up to a gymkhana instead of an F1 race, as Oscar Piastri made a sensational double pass on the drifting Mercedes cars on lap 20 to take second place. Then came McLaren's first strategy mistake. With Norris running in first and roughly a second ahead of his teammate in second, McLaren could have double-stacked their drivers for a pit stop, costing Piastri a second or two of time, but instead they left Oscar out for one more lap. Mercedes had the bravery to double-stack. It was a fatal mistake by McLaren. By the time Oscar exited the pits on the next lap, he lost 4 positions and found himself a distant 6th place. Asked how fair it was to suggest that Piastri should have been pushed harder to pit a lap earlier, team principal Andrea Stella replied, "Very fair. Not only should he have pushed, but we should have pushed harder for the double stack, because by delaying Oscar's stop by 1 lap, we lost much more time than the time we would have lost in a double stack pit stop." There is no doubt that if McLaren had double-stacked, Piastri would have only lost 1 position to Hamilton at most. Stella said that his team were greedy, trying to keep Oscar out and avoid him losing the 5-ish seconds of race time that a double-stack pit stop costs. After Oscar's stop, he was roughly 16 seconds behind his teammate, a far greater deficit than the 6 seconds he would have been behind if they double-stacked. McLaren weren't done with their blunders though. If the first had been like forgetting to add sugar to a cake, the second was like adding salt instead and then misreading the baking time and leaving it in the oven for 30 hours instead of 30 minutes. On lap 38, Mercedes made the call to pit second-place Lewis Hamilton for dry tyres as a short wet period passed. Lando Norris was still in the lead with a gap of 2.2 seconds at that time, and while the decision by the Mercedes driver was brave, it proved to be correct. With 15 laps to go, Mercedes decided to fit a used soft tyre to undercut McLaren and take the lead. At the same time, Oscar Piastri, who was out of the battle for the race win, also decided it was time to stop for slick tyres. Verstappen also stopped for the hard tyre with a completely opposite approach to Mercedes. Over the radio, Oscar was told, "Competitive cars do not have medium. Currently, we think it is the right tyre, 15 laps to go." To which Piastri replied, "Yes, it's the best." McLaren were the only team with a fresh set of medium tyres for both of their cars, and they decided to make use of them for Oscar. Importantly, there had been drivers on soft tyres at the start of the race. While they were the backmarkers of Ocon and Zhou, neither looked any faster than the cars who started on medium tyres, giving a clue that the soft tyres might not have been good for racing. With double digits of laps to go, a used soft tyre was never going to be fast for the entire time. While McLaren used their data and made a decision for Oscar, they decided to start a committee meeting with Lando to choose a tyre compound. At the sharp end of a Grand Prix, when every thousandth of a second can make the difference between winning and losing, the last thing a driver wants to be devoting time to is a long-winded and indirect discussion over tyre strategy, which is exactly what happened. Lando came in a lap later than Piastri for his final pit stop, but the team radio on the in-lap was completely different. Lando was in a position to win, the stakes were far higher, and the McLaren pit wall was scared of making the wrong decision. "We need to box now, the soft is better now, any slicks are," Lando Norris said over the radio. "So we can choose a medium to cover people like Verstappen or soft to cover people like Hamilton," his race engineer replied, without any recommendation or clear statement on which tyres to fit. Lando then said, "Hamilton, I think Hamilton. Or do you think medium? I don't mind." The reply from the pit wall was, "We're going soft, box this lap please, box this lap." It was a terrible decision, and one that McLaren got to in completely the wrong way. The pit wall had the data. They'd saved a fresh set of medium tyres for exactly this situation. They'd even made that decision a lap earlier with Oscar Piastri. But when the moment came to make the decision for Lando Norris, they froze. Everyone has seen the adverts on F1 coverage about the sport being run on millions of data points, but instead of using all that information they spend millions of dollars to harvest, they instead chose to ask the guy driving the car what he was vibing with at that moment. Ask a driver if they want to go for the win or avoid being overtaken, they will always ask to go for the win, which Norris did by asking to cover Hamilton instead of Verstappen. There was obviously doubt from Lando over the decision though, as he followed that answer by asking if the pit wall thought the mediums were better. The team in the pits should have known better. They must have known better, but they were too scared to mess up a potential race win for Lando, so decided to not make a decision, costing him the race win and second place anyway. Norris's slow stop of 4.5 seconds for going long in his pit box is no excuse either. He overshot his pit box markers a little due to a lack of grip, which required the pit crew to adjust their position, which caused the longer stop. Hamilton made a 2.9 second stop, but he had to wait a bit to get out of the box to avoid committing an unsafe release as Valtteri Bottas was in the fast lane. Hamilton spent a total of 30.038 seconds in the pits, while Lando spent 30.38 seconds. 3.5 tenths of a second extra in the pit lane didn't cost Lando anything in the grand scheme of things. Oscar Piastri's final stint on fresh medium tyres was on average 0.73 seconds a lap quicker than Lando Norris's. Had Lando had the medium tyre and been 0.73 seconds a lap quicker because of it over those final 12 laps, he would have won, barring a repeat of the Austrian Grand Prix, but with Hamilton instead of Verstappen. In the post-race media pen, Norris looked utterly devastated, but managed to keep his comments in check. Commenting on his first-place finish, Norris said, "It was a tough race but very enjoyable. A big congratulations to Lewis Hamilton, he executed his race well, so hats off to him and Mercedes. It was a lot of fun battling these guys in these conditions, and you're always on the knife edge when you're risking a lot." He went on to say that it was really disappointing, and the mistakes hurt even more because it was his home race. Zak Brown was also asked about the decisions made during the race. "It was tough. Hindsight's 20/20, as they say. I think we ultimately got it wrong. I think both our drivers could have won there. They did an excellent job." The important thing for McLaren now is to not let these catastrophic errors get them down. They have to learn from them and build from them. If they let them destroy their confidence, then there'll only be more mistakes in the future. They're no longer in the position to sit and wait to see what the cars ahead of them do with strategy anymore. They have to take the initiative, take the brave choice, be decisive, and make decisions that result in race victories, not the embarrassment that happened at Silverstone. What did you think of McLaren's British Grand Prix? And do you think they could have done better in the moment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.